With the 15th pick and with the 26th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft, the Washington Redskins select Dwayne Haskins, Montez Sweat.
Welcome, all my fellow Redskin brethren and sistren. I am your man and president, Redskins fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on the Redskins Report. Got some training camp fodder for you, man. So, day one of training camp in the books. There were some takeaways from training camp. Honestly, the first 2 days of Jay Gruden talking plus training camp day number one, I took some notes, handy dandy pad right here by my side. We'll talk about some things that stood out for me. Took some notes. I'll be reading from this notepad, but there's some things that stood out and things that were takeaways for me. It may be a little different for you. Some things may have stood out for you that you value more than I do, but these are the things that I took away early on. And you can't take away much from just one day of practice, but you know, there were some things said, and that's more along the lines of what I'm referencing, things that we didn't know or things that weren't confirmed for us that we were questioning or doubting or weren't privy to. We got answers to some things, and I want to talk about some of those items here. But before I start with any of this, this goes for the entire training camp, the entire preseason. I just want to throw this entire blanket statement over the entire process known as training camp in the preseason. Treat preseason and training camp like the first week of school and you getting a quiz. All right. If you get 100 on that quiz, it doesn't mean you're going to get an A in the class. All right. If you get a 50 on that quiz, if you even get a 0 on that quiz, it doesn't mean you're going to fail the class. What I'm trying to say is don't overreact to anything that you see or hear at training camp or the preseason. All right. Yes, there are some things that are going to happen that may shape and alter your opinion of this team in one direction or the other. Obviously, injuries, knock on wood, is one of those things. We hope that we steer clear of our old companion over there, the injury reaper. However, don't allow things that are said, don't allow things that you see to shape and form your opinion of this team. Don't run away with things. Don't run away and make blanket statements based off of things you've seen or heard in training camp or the preseason. That being said, let's jump into some training camp fodder from day one. And the first day that Jay Gruden spoke to the media, which was the day the players actually arrived at Richmond. So the biggest takeaway thus far after 1 day of camp and 2 days of Jay Gruden talking is that Donald Penn is coming in for a scheduled visit today. And that's scary even. Now, he's a guy that we floated around. A lot of people have floated around his name. I'm one of them. I talked about him about 3 weeks ago as a potential solution to the Trent Williams situation if that was beyond the point of no return. If Trent didn't want to return to the Redskins, if the Redskins deemed trading Trent the only option, then a guy like Donald Penn was probably the best you were going to be able to do at this point of training camp. Now, obviously, teams are going to let go some players that they don't want to trim their rosters down to 53. And maybe at that time, you can find a younger option and maybe even cheaper than Donald Penn might be. But at the same time, you want a guy that's been working with your team all camp long, all preseason long. And Donald Penn is the best you can probably do at this point. I'm going to tell you right now, that not the fact that Donald Penn is 36 and he's on his last legs as a player and that you don't really know what you're going to get out of Donald Penn at this point it isn't the reason why this is a big storyline. For me, the reason why Donald Penn showing up for a scheduled visit, because we don't know if the Redskins are going to sign him. We don't know if the Redskins are going to like what they see. We don't know if Donald Penn's going to be in tremendous shape or whatever the case may be. The reason this is a big storyline is because this hammers home the point that they're not satisfied with the depth that they have at tackle. They're scared. What they saw on the field in day one of training camp didn't put them at ease. They came into training camp because if they thought that this was a major issue, they would have already contacted Donald Penn 3 weeks ago, and he would have already been a member of the Washington Redskins. They waited because they wanted to see what would show up on the field, and they did not like what they saw. All right. Translation, Geron Christian not being back from offseason MCL surgery. All right. The fact that a guy that we have said all along, we don't want him anywhere near our tackle position, has had to play tackle already in camp at left tackle. All right. In Eric Flowers. This scares the hell out of the team, and it should. That's a scary proposition to have Eric Flowers at tackle, left tackle, that is. Hell, right tackle, it doesn't matter what position he's at. I don't even want him at left guard, for gosh sakes, all right? At the end of the day, that's scary. To hear Jay Gruden say, we brought Eric Flowers in as an offensive lineman, meaning he could play guard, he could play tackle, he could play nothing is what I want to hear. He'll be on the bench. We'll call him if we need him. That's what I want to hear. Not he'll be starting at fill in the blank. All right. Every day I go in hoping, praying, wishing that Wes Martin puts a stranglehold on left guard and that Trent shows up, and I think he will. I still am confident that he will, even though this tells me they're not confident that they don't know that Trent's showing up. They may not have Trent Williams. After listening to Jay Gruden after day one, I felt a lot better. I don't know about you. Excuse me. I felt a lot better about Trent Williams' absence. I felt like, all right, Trent's going to show up. And I still do. I still believe Trent's going to show up. I don't think he's going to show up until the start of the season. I don't think he's going to show up before preseason game number 1. I think he'll hold out until, because I don't think he wants to participate in all of this extra stuff. And let's remember, and I talked about this on my podcast, Trent hasn't been medically cleared to play football yet either. So that's another caveat and another thing you need to take into consideration. Since the surgery on his scalp, he hasn't been medically cleared either. So there's a lot of different wrinkles and nuances to that situation. But at the end of the day, I don't think he's coming back until right before week 1. Because he doesn't need all of this extra work. He doesn't need all this extra banging. Yeah, it would be nice for him to get reps next to a guy like Wes Martin, who's a rookie who he has no familiarity with. But at the end of the day, he didn't need all this extra contact. So I think he's going to sit this thing out. If he's not going to get paid, he's going to go ahead and ride this thing out until the end of camp, end of preseason, and come back ready to rock and roll for the regular season. That's what I think. But in the meantime, they're scared to death at the lack of depth on this football team. And that should scare you if you're a fan out there. And bringing in Donald Penn is a last resort that this team didn't really want to have to resort to, but they don't have a choice at this point, especially with Geron Christian. And honestly speaking, with Geron Christian, we still don't know what we have in Christian. All right, he's a very inexperienced tackle. Last year would have been invaluable experience for him. He got injured. Much like many of the rookies last year that we drafted, he got injured and wasn't able to really get some experience in a lost season last year. The next thing that I took notes on, Case Keenum is getting the most looks with the first team. He's taking that first step towards being the number 1 guy now. Here's the thing. 7-on-7 drills, there were 15 snaps that they did in 7-on-7 work. And, most notably with these quarterbacks, you're going to have 3 sessions that are probably going to be the most impactful. 7-on-7, 11-on-11, and red zone. And yesterday, they had a big emphasis on 7-on-7, and there were 15 snaps. And of the 15 snaps, the breakdown went like this. 5 for Colt, 4 for Colt, all with the first team. 5 for Keenum, 2 with the first team. And the final 6 were all Dwayne Haskins, none with the first team on offense. So that just kind of tells you a little bit of the pecking order. The interesting thing is now that Colt McCoy is healthy, he's a part of this race now. And so you have to start taking him seriously and taking him into consideration as a guy that could potentially get the nod as well, because he knows the offense better than either of the other 2 quarterbacks. And Jay believes in him, believe it or not. Whether you like it or not, Jay does believe in Colt McCoy. He said it himself. It even can be to a detriment that he's got blinders on when it comes to Colt. So don't count Colt McCoy out of this race either. But right now, all reports are Case Keenum looks the best. I told you what Adrian Peterson said. And a lot of people that are there watching think that Case Keenum right now seems to be the best option. Here's a little nugget that we didn't know that I'm really disappointed in. We don't know the severity of the situation, and we don't know how long he's going to be out for. And this was the issue with him in college at Oklahoma State. But 7th round pick Jordan Brailford, I had high hopes for him. I watched him on tape. I broke him down. I talked to you guys about him. I told you that this guy's talented, and I thought he had enough juice off the edge to potentially make this roster. Well, he's starting the training camp out on the PUP list with a groin injury. Really disappointed in that. Was really looking forward to watching him in the preseason and seeing what he could bring to the table. And like I said, we're not set in stone at edge rusher. You know what I mean? I really thought that there was an opportunity for him to potentially crack the final 53-man roster. And, him being on the PUP list isn't going to help his cause any. The Redskins are also bringing in some guys as edge rushers to potentially try out to see if they can add them to this 90-man roster. So that tells you that Brailford may not be on the mend anytime soon. So that was a little disappointing for me, hearing that he was going to start the camp out on the PUP list. Bryce Love was placed on the NFI list, which is the non-football injury list. So we probably won't see him for the first half of the season, is what that tells me. The NFI list, a little bit different than the PUP list. He cannot practice at all. He can't be at practice, any of that stuff. So it'll be very interesting to see what Bryce Love is able to contribute in his first season as a member of the Washington Redskins. It wouldn't shock me if we don't see him at all because of how late in the college football season that injury took place. If we see him, it'll be in the middle to latter portion of the season, I believe. We'll see what happens, though. Jerron Christian and Chase Rouillet are at camp, but neither were participants. Both were in street clothes, both recovering from off-season surgery. Jerron Christian, a torn MCL, and Chase Rouillet, his shoulder. I think that Rouillet isn't really necessarily still dealing with lingering effects of his shoulder, even though that was reported. I think that the Redskins fully expected him to go. Jay Gruden, when asked during the first day when the players first arrived at camp, was Rouillet going to be a go? He said, yeah, Chase Rouillet is fine. He's ready to go. He expected Rouillet to be on the practice field. He was a surprise no-go. I think that his hamstring, which is what he's nursing right now, is the issue and not his shoulder. So any extra time he can get to allow that shoulder to fully heal off of off-season surgery is excellent for me. Again, I think I know what Chase Rouillet is as a football player. I thought he was exceptional for us last year, so I don't have any issues with him sitting out because I know once he gets in there, he should be ready to rock and roll. But right now, I think it's his hamstring that's more of the issue than it is his shoulder. So I look for Rouillet to get healthy, and that will give us some more depth along the offensive line, and really it'll give us a guy that we can count on at the center position, and it will solidify one of the 5 spots along the offensive line, along with Sheriff at right guard and Morgan Moses at right tackle. Right now, our offensive line is sort of in flux with all the injuries. Right now, you're looking at an offensive line that doesn't have its starting center in there, doesn't have its starting right guard in there, and doesn't have its starting left tackle, or excuse me, doesn't have its starting left guard or left tackle in there because we don't know who the starting left guard is at this moment. If Eric Flowers is going to win that job, he can't win it and solidify it if he's taking reps at left tackle, which is why they want to bring in a guy like Donald Penn because, again, they don't want Eric Flowers at left tackle. Trust me, you don't want him there either. Darius Geis was a full go. That was a surprise to me. I talked about taking him and bringing him along slowly. I talked about him being a guy that they didn't want to rush along and that they needed to make sure that he was healthy. Listening to Jay Gruden when they arrived at camp, he said Darius was going to be a full go, and he was at practice. He's a guy that I think could be instrumental in the success of the Redskins because they're going to have to run the football. We already know this to be a fact. They're going to have to run the football to be effective as a football team offensively, to take pressure off of whomever is at quarterback. Really doesn't matter at this point who you pencil in as the quarterback. They're going to need a strong run game, whomever that quarterback is. So a guy like Geis taking some carries with Adrian Peterson and Chris Thompson taking some snaps, you're going to need a guy like Darius Geis to be healthy. Jay Gruden keeps talking up Samaje Perine. Good for him. But at the end of the day, he's not a part of my long-term future for this football team. The future, or maybe he could be. You know what I mean? Because Adrian Peterson isn't going to be along forever. He's not going to be on this roster forever. He's not going to be around here in DC for the next 5 years. And maybe Samaje Perine get his shit together, be a much better part of this football team. And who knows? Maybe after Peterson's gone, maybe the 1-2 punch in terms of carrying the first and second down carries is Geis and Perine. And a guy like Bryce Love is your change of pace, third down type of back. So we'll see. I don't want to count and dismiss Samaje Perine right now. I don't want to dismiss him because Jay seems to love him and has been talking him up the entire offseason. So we'll see what the new and improved Samaje Perine looks like. But Darius Geis was a full goal, and that is good news for everyone involved. And finally, something that we talked about very recently, the inside linebacker position with the news of Mason Foster being released. The next question was, well, who's going to be your starters? I told you that I thought it was going to be SDH, Sean Deion Hamilton, for those of you not familiar with the shortening of his name. And I thought it was going to be John Boom Bostic. Well, that's exactly who it was starting out camp as your starting inside linebackers. I don't think that's going to change. You're going to see some other guys get opportunities. I've been hearing a lot of you talk about the improved physique of Cole Holcomb and JHC, Josh Harvey Clemens. And so we're going to see those guys in preseason. I'm anxious to see what those guys look like. I'm anxious to see what John Bostic, even though I've told you already, pretty much know what John Bostic brings to the table. We'll see what he looks like in this defense, what he brings to the table. But those were your two starting inside linebackers. And honestly speaking, barring injury, knock on wood, don't think that's really subject to change at this point. So those are the things I took away from the first day of camp. My guy Kelvin Harmon looked really good. Watched a couple clips of him breaking dudes off. That's great to see. But again, I said it already. I'll say it again. Don't overreact to what you see. Take everything with a grain of salt. Remember 2 years ago, we watched good old, what's his name from the Browns? The guy from Ohio State that came here, no shirt on, all oiled and lubed up. No homo. All right, pause. One hand grabbing on dudes. Mawson looking nasty, breaking dudes off in camp. And looked like Tarzan, played like Jane. Yeah, remember him? I can't even remember his name. That's how insignificant he was. You guys know who the hell I'm talking about, though. Bottom line is, I don't overreact to camp. Neither should you. So even though I love what I saw out of Kelvin Harmon, and I think he's going to be a key contributor, if you ask me who's going to be the guy to take the reins and become something like a number one wide receiver of the group of receivers that we brought in this year and all the young guys, Cam Sims, all those guys, if you ask me who's the one guy that has the ability to be a number one type, not necessarily a true number one wide receiver, but a number one type, all right, a great value number one wide receiver, if you will, it's Kelvin Harmon. We got a steal in the 6th round. That's the guy I'm looking to make those tough catches on 3rd and 5, and the guy that's going to move the sticks. He's going to be our new Pierre Garçon. I really believe that. So I was impressed with him. But again, it's training camp day number 1. It's training camp overall. Be careful. Believe half of what you see, none of what you hear, even if it's spat by me, your man, Louie T. All right. I am a Redskins fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Redskins spirit will never die. Redskins spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, hail to our beloved Washington Redskins. We'll be meeting quite often, as I'll have a lot of training camp fodder for you over the life of camp. We'll come back and we'll chop it up whenever I feel the need to do so. If there's something big that takes place, if the Redskins do sign Donald Penn, you'll probably see my face again. We'll talk about that. If something happens major, God forbid, I'm not even going to say it, but if something were to occur that doesn't need to happen, we'll talk about it. Either way, you'll see me quite often. We're going to break down these divisions starting next week. I've got a video coming that will chronicle all of that. So stay tuned for all of that. Check out the podcast. I did talk a little Redskins on the podcast, as I generally do. And so with that being said, I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. Until next time, you guys have a good one.
Louie T.